Thank you everyone. Let's start with the presentation. Uh, Thank you everyone for coming for this presentation on You Are Being Watched, and thank you BSides for having me over here. So before I go into the presentation, let me give you a brief introduction of who I am. So I am Bharat Jogi and I work for Qualys as a senior security engineer. And as many of you may already know, Qualys is the leading information security and a compliance cloud company. And what I do on a day-to-day basis is I reverse engineer malwares, binaries. I write signatures to identify new vulnerabilities released every day. And recently I started digging into firmwares and things like that. So I want this presentation to be more of a casual thing. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me anywhere during the presentation. And also we have some t-shirts and really cool towels to give away. So if you guys, I'll be asking many questions, and if you guys can answer, I'll be happy to give away this swag to you. Agenda. So just to give everyone an idea of what this presentation is about, and to ensure that everyone is on the same page as to what to expect from this presentation, let me give you an idea of what we'll be covering today. So we will be talking about IP surveillance systems, their components, their workings, and in particular we will be talking about network video recorders. So does anyone have any idea of what network video recorders are? You first. Yeah.
Network CCTV devices usually accessible over the internet.
Yeah, certainly. And okay. So network video recorders are exactly as the name sounds. They are network devices, and what they do is they would record and store the video feeds from all the surveillance cameras. So usually what happens is in an organization, or let's say if you are using these devices at your home, what you would do is there would be like n number of IP cameras to surveil the premises, and what you want to do is you would like to have a central device to which you could log on to, and then view all the video feeds from all the surveillance cameras. And also what these devices do is they would store the video feeds from all the cameras. So let's say you decide if you want to go in time and see what happened at a particular day or at a particular time, then you could play back all the videos. So what we'll be doing is we'll be seeing, looking at these network video recorders in detail. We'll be what we'll do is we'll see their working. We'll try to analyze the firmware which goes inside these devices, and probably we'll try to do some manual testing and find some vulnerabilities in these devices. And later on, we'll try to hack one of these devices and see the live video feeds from all the cameras that are connected to this device. Does that sound fun? It's an IP surveillance system. Like even before we go into this analysis of the firmware that goes inside this network video recorders and trying to find vulnerabilities in these devices, let me point to you why this research is so important, or why do we even care if there are like vulnerabilities in these devices. Turns out that these IP surveillance systems are increasingly used in home and in business environments. People and organizations deploy these systems in their environment to secure critical resources, or they would what they want is to have a look at what is going on inside these premises. Parents do deploy these systems at their home so that they could have like a view to ensure their kids' safety. And these systems are usually deployed in the organization, or people use the systems thinking that because these are devices to secure your premises, these devices in turn are secure devices. But turns out that this is not the case. Let me give you a couple of examples of where these devices are used. So these devices are used at, you can find them at many stores. You would find them, and many businesses use these surveillance systems. What you could see over there is probably of a restaurant or something. People do deploy these systems in their labs, and these are deployed at construction sites, and there are many applications for these devices. Now, these examples are not just that I made up, but the video feeds that you see, these are actual screencasts from the devices, from the real targets. And there are like many interesting places where we found these devices. Like one of the targets which we identified was in Ukraine, and that appeared to be like a casino in Ukraine. So that's okay, but we were also able to find a target in Central Europe, and that target was actually being used in the country's most strategic and research center. So these devices are used anywhere, and people do believe that these are security devices, they would be secure, but turns out that this is not the case. So the network video recorder that will be dealing today is the D-Link's network recorder DNR322L and DNR326. So both of these devices are basically the same device. The firmware which goes inside both of these devices are the same. It's just that one is used for home edition and another is for business edition. The business edition has like more storage and a better hardware. But essentially the firmware which goes into these devices are basically the same. And these devices do have many inbuilt features. What they could do is they could do an auto backup for you. So even these devices, they have like a limited storage. Not limited storage because like a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte depending upon the hard drive that you install. But what business deployments usually do is they would also want to have a backup to an FTP site. So they could do a scheduled backup, let's say every night at 2 a.m. They want that all the video feeds to be backed up to an FTP site. They also do have motion detection capability. So what will happen is if any of the video surveillance, a motion has been detected from any of the video surveillance cameras, these devices could also send you email alerts. And there are many other features for these devices. Let me play a video for you to see how these devices are being marketed out. Revolutionary 21st century devices. For home users. Secure and convenient. And you can access it from everywhere, your smartphones and things like that. Yeah. So revolutionary home securing devices for 21st centuries, your convenience, secure and in cost-effective way. But are these devices really secure? This is what we are going to analyze in this presentation. So let me show you how a typical installation for this device looks like. So as you can see, there would be like many IP surveillance cameras. They would be talking to the network video recorder device, and you could access this device from anywhere over the internet. They could be accessed from your mobile devices, your smartphones, also from PCs and yeah. So over here you see that these devices are talking to the router, but these devices would actually directly talk to the network video recorder as well. So this is how an admin UI for these devices looks like. You could do your You can have camera setup. You could schedule an event setup. You could, whenever a motion is detected, you could ask the device to send you an email and things like that. So let's, so because all these features that I found in this device, I was really very, fascinated by the amount of features which this single device has. It could be accessed from anywhere, your smartphones, plus you have this facility where they could send you email alerts and things like that. So I decided at this point that let me try to see how this device works. Let me try to find how secure these devices are. So our first step that I took was to see the firmware that goes inside this product. The firmware is readily accessible. You could go to D-Link's website, download the firmware. You don't need to have any account, or you don't need to have this device at all to download the firmware. You just go to the website and download the firmware. So I started extracting the firmware, and this is what I found. So the device is basically you could consider it as a stripped downward running a very tiny Linux on an ARM architecture, and it has an inbuilt squash file system. The squash file system is nothing but it's a compressed file system for read-only files, and you will find many of these embedded systems, they do have the squash file systems. And once you extract all the firmware, this is what it looks like. It's basically the structure, if you see, it's basically like any Linux box. You'll have a bin folder, you'll have like a couple of drivers and some binaries. And the entire UI that the user interacts with the system goes into the folder named web, and all the HTML files, the JavaScript files goes inside this folder. You see how a typical user would interact with the system. So what an administrator could do is he could just log into the web UI for the firmware of the device, and the UI that he sees is basically HTML and some JavaScript. But all the processing that is done, this is done at the CGI layer. So what happens is, let's say a user wants to change some settings, the JavaScript will in turn call the CGI functions, and the CGI functions, the CGI layer will do all the processing, and it will be returned to the user. So let's see what all the vulnerabilities that I was able to find in the system. The first vulnerability is the denial of service vulnerability. Very basic. But for these devices, the security surveillance devices, I believe denial of service vulnerability is a really big deal over here, because what happens is, let's say if you are trying to secure some premises and there's an attacker who wants to get into your premise, the very first thing he could do is he could do a denial of service on the NVR system, so that nothing gets captured in the video recorder device. So what you could do from remote is you can do a denial of service vulnerability, which is remotely you could send request to the target and it would do a reboot on the target. Sorry? Yeah. So all the vulnerabilities that we'll be discussing today, these are all unauthenticated remote vulnerabilities. So he could remotely reboot the system, he could also remotely completely shut down the system, and he could also do a complete factory reset on the system. So once he does that, like your complete NVR system is of no use. The administrator has to go physically to the device and then he has to configure everything again. So it basically renders the device useless. Let me give you a demo of this. We'll certainly not do the remote shutdown because I want my target to be alive for the future the other demos. So we'll just do a remote restart, a reboot on the target, and that would give you guys an idea. Let me show you where our device is. It's working fine. The Wi-Fi speed is too slow, so might take a while. 10, 10, 35, 41 is our target. We see that our target is alive, but it's just that the speed is too slow. Okay, we have the target. So admin. This is our target. Obviously, you will see blank over here. I have like 2 cameras connected to the target. Those are like in my cubicle. I don't want to show everyone what's going on inside my cubicle, inside college. So these targets are blanked out. Okay. So I'll do a ping on the target. And then I have this small tool that I wrote to exploit so the -I command will just give you some details of what the target is. If you could see over here, here is the IP address, this is the device, DNR 322L, the firmware version that is running on the target. And let's try to do a remote read. So here you see that the ping request timed out. So probably the device is going inside on the reboot. But I think it's back up again. Let's try to see if the target is live. Okay, yeah, so it's up again. Was demo 1. So what was the other vulnerabilities that I was able to find on the target? The target has multiple information disclosure vulnerabilities, and what this information includes is the complete configuration of the target. Second type, which is of a bit of a more severity, is it will spit out the complete configuration of the FTP server that has been configured. Yeah.
You just mentioned that there was no authentication that was required, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way that you can show us the code what exactly you attack?
Sorry?
Is there a way that you can show the code and say us how exactly you attack?
I think I'll cover that in the later part of the presentation. So, information disclosure vulnerabilities include complete target configuration. Second is the FTP credentials. So, if the target is configured to have like an FTP backup site, it would give you credentials of the FTP backup site, including the IP addresses, port number, and things like that. And another of the most severe, I think, of the information disclosure vulnerability is, remember I told you like these target would have like n number of IP cameras connected to it. This information disclosure vulnerability will give you the camera credentials of all the IP services cameras that are connected to the device. So then if suppose you want to target, so if you want to target individual IP cameras one by one, you could do that as well. Let me give you a demo for that. Target configuration. As you can see, it got the network settings on the target, the IP address, if the DHCP is enabled or not, what are the gateways, what is the description of the target, its MAC address, what is the uptime of the target. Because it was just rebooted, the uptime is just shows like 1 minute. Then the hard drive, how many hard drives are connected to the target. So this target has 2 hard drives. Use space is this, total size of the target, of the hard drives. And plus it gives all the users that are on the target. So besides it, so this target has like 6 different users who could access this device. Qualys, Test, Bharat. So another is the FTP, information disclosure vulnerabilities, the FTP settings of the target. So to get the FTP settings, I can 10, 21. So here you can see the target is configured to work for an FTP backup site. Here is the IP address of the FTP server, the port, the root, username, root, password, and folders where it would be all the video files to be stored. And the most critical of get the camera credentials. You do this. So this tells that the target has 2 IP cameras that are connected to the device. The name of the camera is this because it is like that. The IP.
When you reset the device, I know it's not be the case for all of them, but did this device default back to a default admin credentials? Is that a path for this? I don't want to derail you, but I know you're showing admin credentials now, but when you reset this device, did it reset it to default?
It would reset it to default. I believe when you do the reset, it will do a factory reset. So factory reset, it has only, the credentials are admin with blank password. So here you can see there are 2 cameras that are connected to the device. The IP address, the port on which it is working on, the clear text password, the username, the password, the brand which the camera is dealing. Mind you, this device could also monitor video camera feeds from different models, not just from dealing, but from different vendors as well. The model number, what channel are they working on, and yeah. So I think we have covered all the information disclosure vulnerabilities. Covered the demo too. Now what you could also do is remotely you could create a new user for the for this device. So basically once you create a new user on the device, what you could do is you could log on with this newly created user, the credentials that you give, and then probably view all the video feeds from all the cameras. In fact, when this D-Link also provides you an iPhone app and also an Android app. So what you could do is once you have created this new user, you could just create a new website, like a site for this, and then I'm not sure if the Wi-Fi is too good, but I could show you like how I was able to create a couple of users on the targets in the wild, and you could basically view the surveillance feeds from all these targets right from your iPhone or any of your smart devices. So if you want, let's try to create a new user. try to create a username BSides, password as Vegas. BSides Vegas. Yeah, let's see. Let's first see if the user was created successfully. This thing is too slow. So you see at the end there was a new user created with BSides. Now let's try to log on to the system with newly created credentials.
Can you pass any group information to that? Assign that to a group in any way?
I do believe I am not assigning any group to this user, but what I do is I just give it all the credentials, like privileges to view all the IP cameras. So the newly created user, what you could do is selectively you could assign a user feeds to a particular video feed from a particular camera. But what I do is I just assign it all the users. So all the
The user you created didn't have one.
sorry.
The user that you created is BSides.
What did I? Slides.
Yeah.
BSidesLV.
Supposed to let him just, let it fail? Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, it's spoiler thunder.
Party Cooper.
Okay, so here you see we were able to log into the system. And if the cameras were connected, you will be able to see all the video feeds. Now, one of the this device, the security of this device is so broken that like this is a UI which a user, not an admin user would see, but what the newly created user would see, not an admin. But if you remember that an administrator could access a link, what this device does is before checking for authentication, before going to loading any page, what it would do is it would try to check for authentication. But what it would not do is it would just check if the authentication was successful or not, but it would not check if the administrator login was successful or not. So if you remember like any of the, let's say, just try to go on this thing, because I know that an administrator, once he logs in, he would be able to visit this URL. If the created user, if you access this URL, let's see what happens.
How does the device keep session state? Does it use a cookie or?
No user cookie, what it does is it would just, so this, let me show you.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
It's so bad he has to show it.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
So what happens is every time when a new page is being loaded, what it will do an AJAX call on the server to check if the target is authenticated or not. But it never checks if the target is authenticated with an admin credential or with the user credential. So what you could do is you could basically view any of the any of the admin pages if you just able to happen to know the URL which the administrator would usually visit. This thing is
That's disgusting.
But yeah, you could add as many users, you could visit the admin.html page, even if you are not a user. If you are not an admin. I think we'll just give it some time.
So this is the most recent firmware?
Yeah,
And so this dealing GUI, the UI, is going to be similar across a lot of their devices. A lot of their other devices have the same.
I will cover in the later part of the presentation what other devices from dealing are also available. We are able to create the new user successfully. Now there is another vulnerability, firmware upload vulnerability. So what happens is the user interface where you could upload the firmware, that page has no security at all. It does not even ask you for your admin credentials, and even if it asks you, you could always create a new user and just go to the link where you could upload the firmware. Now the device internally does not check if the firmware which the user is trying to upload is signed by D-Link or no. There is no sort of there is no sort of obfuscation. You could just create a new firmware, just try to add a beef root to it, and just create a new firmware, upload it to the device. The device will readily accept the newly created firmware, and then at that point, it's basically up to the malicious intent of an attacker how hard he wants to hit the device, how hard he wants to go deep into the
Have you uploaded? Have you sent in modified firmware?
Yeah.
What did D-Link say about that?
So.
Because I'm guessing you haven't done responsible disclosure yet.
No, we.
But you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
We disclosed it to D-Link, and I think let's try to see what.
Okay, sorry.
What ticket number did they give you?
They did not give us any ticket number. So all these vulnerabilities. So what happened is I was trying to do some manual testing. Once I extracted all the firmware, what I was trying to do is because I know all the front end, all the user interaction is done through all the files in the web directory. What I did is I was trying to go over all these files one by one just to manually to see if there are any vulnerabilities or not. So what struck me is in most of all the files that are on the firmware, there was this one piece of code that was in all the files. So what it was trying to do is was dynamically trying to call a JavaScript function.js file. And then I saw, okay, what's going on inside this function.js file. So what I saw is there was this, on the very beginning of this file, what happens is it makes an AJAX call. So the AJAX call is a post request to a page CGI bin-login manager.cgi, and then with command UI check WTO. And if the function returns with fail, if the server replies with fail, then it will redirect you to the login page, and if it does not reply with fail, then it would just allow you to access whatever page you are trying to access. So basically, if you could just make a call directly to, what you could do is, you could always have a proxy running, burp suite running, and you could always modify the request. Or what you could do is just make curl calls directly to the CGI pages, and it will just, because the CGI layer never checks that the user is authenticated or not. What it does, it just feels that if it is receiving the request, then probably the user is always authenticated. So what you could do is just make a call directly, post curl calls to the CGI layer directly, and it will readily, it is more than happy to whatever you ask it to do. So to answer your question, if the other families of D-Link devices are also vulnerable, the answer is yes. The network storage devices with D-Link's network storage devices do also have all these vulnerabilities that we talked about. And yeah, it's basically the UI, they just changed the UI, which the network video recorders are basically some HTML and JavaScript. Now the storage devices, they have a bit fancy and they use jQuery for all the UI stuff. But basically everything, the firmware which goes inside this product, the core is almost the same for the network video recorders and storage devices. And in particular, I'm talking about the DNS320L. Yeah, they are also vulnerable to other vulnerabilities. patches. So we reported all these vulnerabilities to D-Link sometime April and May first week, and D-Link did publish a beta firmware. Just it was less than 2 weeks back, right before the presentation. I haven't got the time to check if all the vulnerabilities are fixed or not, but they do acknowledge all the vulnerabilities and give credit to Qualys for that. Summary. So what we have seen is these devices, these so-called security devices which you deploy in your environment, they are not really secure. They do have many vulnerabilities, so if you are trying to use these devices, make sure that at least go and check if these vulnerabilities, these devices have some vulnerabilities or not. If there are like vendors who have an email alert program whenever the newer firmware is released, I think we should, you should always try to subscribe for that. And yeah, I think that's it. Do you have any questions on this?
So what was D-Link's reaction when you contacted them?
So D-Link, D-Link has this unpublicized bug bounty program. So they don't really advertise it, but they do have it. So when we reported all these vulnerabilities to them, first of all, it was very hard to get in touch with them because they don't have like usually all the big vendors, they do have contact information where security researchers would give them their findings. So the D-Link, it was a bit hard to get in touch with them. So once we got in touch with them, the response was pretty quick. They asked us to sign, so they informed us about their unpublicized bug bounty program. But they had some conditions which would have, and we did not want any sort of restrictions on using this information. So we did not sign their MOU. But I think, yeah, after that, they, in around 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks, like 2 months, or I guess less than 3 months now, they did publish an patch for that. So that was good from their side.
Yeah, at least they got.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you know if their enterprise solution links in that has the ability to use Active Directory credentials for logins?
Sorry?
Do you know if their enterprise or the corporate solution has the ability to use Active Directory for credential logins?
I'm not really sure for that about that. So what nowadays what happens is D-Link is not it is publicizing more of their My D-Link thing. What happens is, what you could do is once you install these devices, you could register it with an email ID so that you could access it from, you don't have to remember your these IP addresses of these devices. What you could do is you could log into the My D-Link website and then log in with your credentials, and all the devices that are registered with this with the email ID, it would always show up on the device and you could access it from there. I think that's a good way of accessing these devices rather than memorizing the IP addresses. But I'm not sure if that solution would scale or would work for the business environments. Obviously, home user would be more, it is more easy for home users to use this feature, but I'm not sure about the business environments. Any other?
Have you published this tool so we can audit our own devices?
So yeah, so I wanted to publish these tools, but I think it's less than, it's not even 2 weeks, and we know, like I work for Qualys, and we know that customers usually don't patch these systems or even any systems so soon. So I think I will hold on for some time before we will release the tool, but I think yeah, I will wait some time before we publish this tool.
Would it be reasonable to say we could just go grab the firmware and find the correct resources
Sure.
ourselves?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that firmware version still available to your knowledge?
Sorry?
Is that firmware version still, do they have backup?
I think,
firmware?
yeah, it's still available. Last time I checked, it was available because the new firmware that D-Link has released, it is still in beta phase. So it clearly mentioned that they don't support beta firmware. So I think yeah, it's still up there. Any other questions?
So any other devices, manufacturers that you looked at besides D-Link?
I haven't worked with many other devices, but there are many other researchers who have found vulnerabilities in devices like this. I remember there were 2 Spanish researchers. They did a very good. They were able to find many of the DVR targets, and even they had like really simple vulnerabilities where if you could just go to target / config dot something, it will give you all the credentials to access that target. So there are like many devices who are vulnerable, and there has been other research work on this as well. Any other questions?
Are you recommending like removing these devices completely, or if they're accessible on private
No,
network, VPN, is it still okay?
no, these are like you do need this device. It's not like you don't want these devices. But what you could do is you could have something like an access control for these devices, where you could limit who can use this device. And I do believe this D-Link network video recorder device, they also do have like you could have an access control and limit the IPs. Yeah.
Does it have?
Yeah.
Split browsing.
Yeah. Any other questions?